Hey guys, welcome to yet another edition of the Techzim podcast. My name is Tinashe, and today I'm joined by
Fry.
Farai. And it's just the two of us today. Rufaro is away.
Yeah.
It's a recording that we almost forgot, isn't it, Farai?
Yeah. And interestingly enough, it's an amazing conversation, I think. So, but yeah, we almost missed it because of our schedules and whatnot. But fortunately, better late than never.
Better late than never. And yeah, it's interesting that you said it's going to be an amazing talk of overselling, overhyping.
Yeah.
But if you get disappointed,
We,
please, it's not my fault. It's this guy.
I'm a salesman. That's my side hustle. So it's my
Yeah,
job to oversell things.
the sports are showing. Sports are showing. So the amazing conversation, as Farai puts it, is about media. So we are talking about the media business, particularly in the digital age, the business models for media businesses. So it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation because not just because Techzim is a media business, but what has happened to media, I believe it's so telling of other industries, what is actually happening right now in other industries and what will happen to other industries. And number two, the main media sector also, it has such a strong influence on technology, and it is strongly influenced by technology. So if you think about all the breakthroughs in technology, they have something to do with media, you know. So when we talk of the proliferation of mobile devices, they are essentially media devices. They allow us to consume content, to create content, and over time, the changes within the media space have resulted in very huge, humongous changes to society as well. Right from the beginning, you know, like the invention of writing itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't think about it, but it's a media innovation, you know, it's a communications innovation. And then all the way through to, you know, the printing press, which then gave rise to mass communication. So it is an interesting sector, and yeah. So we're going to dig into that. Farai, let's just start up. Oh, I cut you?
No. You can go on.
Oh, okay. So let's just start talking about, I mean, what traditionally how media businesses have made money, and particularly looking at Zimbabwe.
Okay, so by traditionally, I assume you're talking about print, because like you said, we've got like so many eras to discuss of. So I assume and I pray you're talking about print.
So let's go for print then.
Okay, fantastic. So with print, the model is, it's a bit surprising that a lot of people don't understand how newspapers make their money, but it's pretty simple. So the the fundamental issue is advertising. So we write content, we bundle it up in this newspaper, and then we try to sell it to 1 million, 10 million, 5 million people. And by doing so, advertisers have incentive to be in our paper because they're going to reach 1 million, 5 million, 10 million people. And that's how they make money. Or that's how the print businesses made their money.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, I mean, you insisted on print, but it's the same even with television.
Yeah, it scales across.
Yeah, it was just about attracting audiences, and then selling those eyeballs to
Yeah.
to businesses that want to push products and services. Same goes with radio. And then came the internet.
Yeah. I think this is, people love to say disruption a lot. I think this is where it kind of applies.
Hmm.
The internet opened it up so that a Farai can open his blog and also attract eyeballs and now compete with print businesses he couldn't compete with, because print, the advantage those guys had, or maybe disadvantage, it's kind of double-edged. They could gatekeep because it needed a lot of capital to start, whereas now I need an internet connection, a blog, and time to build up a following. But it's much easier to get into than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, because you couldn't imagine starting a newspaper that
Yeah.
easily. You know, back then you needed printing presses, which are very expensive, and then you would need.
A distribution network as well,
Yeah,
if it's
exactly.
print particularly.
Yeah, so delivery trucks and
Exactly.
yeah,
If it's radio, you needed licensing, which you pay for annually or whatever. It's just a lot to deal with. Well, you still do need it for radio, and
mm,
or to an extent, because you can also set up stations on the internet, or at least
yeah,
station like
yeah. And oh
entities.
yeah, I mean, right now we are on a podcast. You know, we didn't talk
Exactly.
to the
So
Broadcasting Authority of Zimbabwe to say, hey, we want to do a podcast. We just started doing. so so
and
so
then we get our views and interact with people. Exactly.
yeah. So the barrier to entry has been lowered, and that
We
fundamentally
could go as far as saying it's been removed
it has, yeah,
entirely.
because
I
anyone
mean,
with
that
a
would be an
mobile device
exaggeration,
that
but
connects to the internet
exactly,
is a content
has
creator.
influence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 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 that changed things for traditional media. So again, what happened was they tried to get online. They you know, so initially when the internet came, most publishers thought it was just an extension of how they usually operated, and then so they just put
Yeah.
their newspapers as they were online. Um, and initially, because the internet, I mean, very few people were connected, and right now, uh, giving specific examples of the developed world when in the early days of the internet, so they could still charge very high premiums for advertising on their online publications because they were still
Yeah.
a little bit
They
complex.
still
Not
didn't have competition as well. Yeah.
yeah. So it seemed like the internet was the best thing that ever happened. So, oh, we can just put there, and then you have this advertising inventory that we can change and things like that. And I guess it was
And
first.
and and I think, speaking to your point as well, initially maybe that was good for them because they saw it as they're cutting costs because they don't have to run the physical machinery. Or
Mhm.
you are running computers and whatnot, but the printing press itself,
Yeah,
the factories.
yeah. And the biggest thing, the biggest advantage that the internet gives is that marginal cost is equal to zero. So
Yeah.
every reader costs you nothing. So you all your costs are upfront, but whether it's 1,000 people reading your content or it's 10,000, uh, the cost is
The cost to
negligible.
get to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
But with the
almost the same.
newspaper, you are actually printing physical things. So each and every additional user costs you to
You're kind of buying them as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
So internet allows this thing called scale because of those unit economics, the marginal cost is or very close to zero. Um, but that gives its own problems. Like we're saying, the barrier to entry was now low, and then scaling. The internet is really it enables scale.
Yeah.
Uh, so everybody started competing with everybody else. So, because I think if we backtrack a little bit, sorry, we are now going through the history of publishing. But one of the things, like Farai was explaining, that the newspaper was bundled with adverts, because advertisers wanted to reach the readers. What was also happening, because there was such a barrier to entry, so the newspaper itself became a bundle when it came to content. You had a sports section, you had a current news section, you had an international news section, you had
all that stuff.
entertainment in there, cartoon strips, you had your horoscopes, all that, because they were trying to reach. So someone is more interested in entertainment, whereas someone is looking for sport. So newspapers were now becoming thicker and thicker to try to address everybody. So that the addressable market will be huge. And the investment in the printing presses and the distribution network will be worthwhile, because we are reaching as many people as we can, and also which means advertisers will come on us. It would have been very difficult. I mean, there were publications, particularly magazines, that would then maybe focus on specifics, entertainment and some on sports, or even a particular sport. But when it comes to newspapers, they were really a bundle.
And even maybe referring how hard it was for magazines, those were the guys who were first obliterated by the internet. Like, they lost their value, I think, quicker than most.
Yeah, I think we can say that. Yeah. So there are now just a few magazines that are really, that have this strong brand and stuff, but yeah, they've kind of become irrelevant, because particularly entertainment magazines, I mean, by the time it's in the magazine, we've already seen it on. We've
already seen it, exactly. And you see that most of these guys who had magazines, they transitioned to online, which, and it's a bit ironic. We say these were the guys who were first obliterated, but their transition was easier because they were focusing on a niche. So funnily enough, they were kind of best placed for people who were printing physical copies. They were best placed for that transition.
Yeah. So which you then introduce something there like niches. So the thing with the internet is, your addressable market is literally the whole world. So, so suddenly, someone who's just interested in doing sports content, he has a big market, because they are not limited by geography. Newspapers were limited by geography. To then do an international paper, it was very, very difficult. And even in large countries like the United States, to do a national paper, it was difficult. So they had these regional newspapers and things like that. So, but with the internet, it became open season. The problem with that now is, let's talk about even the newspapers competing against themselves, right? Let's talk about the local paper, the Herald. The Herald has an international section. It still does to this day. And they're talking about what's happening in the United States and stuff, but they can't be better at reporting on the United States than the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever other.
Exactly, which you and I can now access a few clicks away.
Exactly. So now, like we said at the beginning, the newspapers just went onto the internet as they were, not realizing that no, this bundle was made possible by the restriction in distribution, the restriction in the actual printing.
But and even the number of people we were going to reach.
Exactly. So the bundle made sense. But on the internet, the bundle didn't make sense because you were not the best at everything. So, so even competing amongst themselves, you find that the Herald's international news is almost irrelevant to you and I because we already know those stories from online.
Yeah, and I think now it's even worse because now they take the stories off of other publications and then they give them credit within the paper. So you already know that it's not them. So there's no reason for me to pay attention to it that much.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
so that's the impact that the internet made then on this sort of on this business. The competition became stiff, and then besides that, it was not just competing in terms of the Herald versus the Newsday and stuff. It was story versus story because the internet is it's just a collection of pages. So, you know, there is, for a particular story, a reader will read it on this publication, maybe because they were first to publish it or for whatever other reason.
Yeah.
So every page competes with every other page on the internet, kind of.
Which I think introduces a big problem, eh?
Yeah.
It introduces a big problem in that either your quality has to skyrocket, or we see publications turn into things like clickbait. I think clickbait became a thing when the internet like blew up because people now are doing anything to get that, to make sure that I'm getting that view from you particularly, and you're not picking another publication running the same story.
Exactly. So then what did that do? It literally it meant supply of content became infinite.
Yeah.
I have access to any content I want as long as it's on the internet. I have access to it. I mean, there can be paywalls and stuff. We'll probably get to that. But there's just, I'm spoiled for choice as a reader.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say 9 out of 10 times you can access the content you want.
Yeah. So that presents a problem when it comes to economics, because the higher the supply, the lower the price.
Yeah.
So if the supply outstrips demand by so many magnitudes that we can even say it's infinite, the supply is infinite, it means
The value of your content, woo.
it kind of drops. And
Yeah.
same goes when for advertisers now, because they can advertise for what they want is eyeballs. So your page on the Herald, your page on Newsday, your page on Techzim, on Pindula, wherever, is almost equal to just any other page.
Exactly.
So you can't then demand as much as newspapers were used to demanding from advertisers.
Yeah.
And
And worse off now, where the internet also gives us like in-depth statistics, where with print, well, they held all the control. There was no other distribution. Whereas with once we go online, my proposition to an advertiser can be, look, you're selling a tech product. I have 100,000 viewers. These guys have 1 million, but these 100,000 viewers are coming for tech products to my site. So the likelihood of you converting that is higher, and all these complex nuances are introduced into play, further driving down prices and increasing competition and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you know, so because newspapers, when they first got online, they just transposed themselves from offline to online without changing their structure, their business model, and everything. So they started to get a beating just by the whole setup itself, not by anyone else, but just by the economics of the field.
Yeah, approach.
Yeah. Um, so they still had this huge cost structure, you know, but advertisers would not pay that much because well, you know what, an eyeball is an eyeball, so you don't have a monopoly over that.
Yeah.
And again, the thing that happened is, as vast as the internet was and kept growing, it needed to be organized. It was, you know, when you are spoiled for choice, it becomes very difficult to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think they call it, is it choice paralysis or something like that? They've got some technical term for it.
Yeah, it becomes, it's quite difficult. Even before we go to choice paralysis, actually, just finding the needle in the haystack kind
Yeah.
of scenario. So
Or like you mean you have to sift through so much before you find what you actually want. And then
exactly.
it turns out what you want is being published by 6,000 guys. Who do I pick? Okay, okay.
So that gave rise to a company called Google. Google was not the first search engine, but yeah, it was the one that got the market because they just had the superior product that gave people exactly what they were looking for. The way that they organized the information that was on the internet was intuitive of how people actually look for information.
Yeah.
So everyone's first door to the internet became Google. So if they heard that something happened to the president, they'll go and type in president today. And then Google
Yeah.
would give them a list of search results and little snippets, and they will choose from there which they want to read. So what that did right there meant that the valuable company on the internet at that point was Facebook from an advertising revenue perspective, because they are the front door to the internet.
Do you mean Facebook or Google?
Sorry, Google. I said Facebook.
Okay. I know, I think maybe we will touch on Facebook because
Yeah.
they've also disrupted the advertising, or at least they're now heavily involved with the
Yeah.
advertising as well. So I
Yeah.
kind of saw that. Yeah.
So, and what was also valuable about the ads that Google was searching is because these are people tell Google exactly what they are looking for. And that's valuable to people who want to sell products. They want to
Yeah,
know.
the targeted advertising.
Yeah. So it's really targeted, and it's because the person who's looking for information, he has declared their intention.
Yeah. I think maybe a good way to relate that to a person listening to this is the reason why you always see B forward when you're scrolling is because a lot of Zimbabweans follow through on B forward links. So they now kind of think, if it's a Zimbabwean guy or girl, the chances that they'll follow through on B forward because they want to buy a car high. That's what we mean by targeted advertising.
Yeah. So that's for, you know, like the ads that people see around the internet that are placed there by Google, because Google then eventually they bought a company called DoubleClick, and now not they just don't sell their search advertising. They are also talking to publishers like Techzim, like
Yeah.
Herald, like everyone else, to say, hey, allow me to place ads on your site, and I'll give you 70% of the revenue.
Yeah.
But because it's ads that are being placed on the whole internet, of course, the value per ad is generally quite low. But to Google, it's a lot of money because it's on aggregate.
Yeah, it's that thing we're talking about as well of scaling, where it's one ad. If you think of it in the perspective of it's one ad, yeah, it seems minuscule. But then when you then understand that, well, there are like a million publishers, and that's just an example. There are not a million publishers on the internet. But if you think of it in that sense, it scales up pretty quickly.
Yeah. So that's meant that most of the advertising revenue on the internet was going to Google, and then publishers, they just had a little bit of that. So this is why we are talking about the business model of media business in this digital age, because they quickly realized that, oh, this won't work. And then even the local publishers here, our news guys, when they jumped on as well, they initially, I think it was more about to say, yeah, this is a new thing, everyone is going there, and then they just went online as well, and it didn't disrupt much of what they were doing because, well, there were fewer people online, so yeah, there wasn't much. But I guess
there was still their main focus was still selling the physical paper in the street.
Yeah, and I think they're still there in a way. That's where their money comes from.
Yeah, I think interestingly, maybe in the case of Zim Papers, which I think is the biggest, they are the biggest publisher, right? Like locally.
Yeah.
Only 4% of their revenue is digital, so they are firmly in that era. They're still there.
So, which explains why one of the decisions that they made, was it last year when they decided to not to publish the full stories online?
Yep, it was. Yeah, it was early last year, I believe. Either early last year or late 2018, but I think it was last year. It
So I
was
remember,
the Herald, it was Daily News and Newsday. Those three are the ones I remember specifically. They pulled out, and I think they did it at similar times as well. So it seemed like something they actually planned on together.
oh, okay. And it didn't have the outcomes they thought, isn't? Because they wanted to push
Yeah.
sales to the newspaper. So they would say, for more, buy our newspaper or something like that. I don't know if they said that,
Yeah,
but that's what they implied.
yeah, essentially that's what they said, because they would say for the full story, get the physical copy of the Herald. In the Herald's case, maybe that's not verbatim what they said, but it's extremely close. And I think what one of the reasons they gave was people are ripping our content, or at least other online publishers are ripping our content online and just copy pasting it. But still, I think the problem with that thinking is, if I am ripping off someone's content, I will still pay $1 to get the physical paper and still rip it off. And now, because you have removed yourself from the internet, I'm actually more empowered. So it was a weird move, and one I think that spoke to the fact that they just didn't understand how the internet works, or at least how online publishing works.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's painful for people to steal content. It happens a number of times, even to us.
Exactly.
Content that worked hard to create, and then someone just takes it. But I guess their way of dealing with it, I guess their thinking was, oh, we don't really make much out of this anyway, this internet thing. And then these people are also getting the eyeballs, they're getting the views out of our content. So we'll just not do the work for them, you know? But like you're saying, they then put themselves. So the people were stealing content, it became even more lucrative because all the eyeballs would be coming to them.
Exactly. And also in terms of, just from a search engine perspective, I think let's speak from the Google perspective at least, the guys who were ripping content off, in Google's eyes, they became the authority because they were the ones putting these stories online first. Whereas when Herald was posting their story, and then someone copying, Google would know that, and they would still give Herald some, what would I say, a bit of a boost when I search
Yeah.
for a story. They would say, you guys came first, so you published it first, so we assume you are the ones who broke this news.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
they took that away from themselves.
They did, because I think one of them was saying we will publish the stories later in the afternoon. But by the time they did that, the ranking on the search on the search engines would be different.
It essentially meant they were getting punished for their own content.
So it's sad, and I know but it's because it's not an easy question. It's still the business models for media business, particularly news business online. It's still not yet figured out. So I know the other thing that happened. It happened offline. It was with H Metro. In 2018, they started advertising rigorously, rebrand, blah, 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 blah. And we're cleaning up the newspaper so that it doesn't have these bizarre things that was always covered, which was a mistake because people were buying it for the bizarre things. And then they
a big mistake because
yeah. And then they were like,
I think that's a fantastic example. You can go on.
yeah. And they were like, it's going to be half price. So I wrote an article there, and I was like, these guys, because that's the natural impulse, because I think their circulation was dwindling, the number of readers. So they wanted to boost that, and they have the price. And that's a mistake that businesses make all the time, to think, oh, if I'm not having sales, then I have to lower my price. But it should not be automatic like that every time.
Yeah.
And the problem with lowering your price is you have actually reduced your margin. So you have reduced your capacity actually to fight whatever is going on.
Exactly.
So, and in that article, I was explaining that even by halving the price, they will not get a consumerate increase
in sales.
It's more or less the same people who were buying the H Metro who will keep buying it. And people who are going to stop buying the H Metro, we're still going to stop buying it. And
exactly.
cleaning
And
up.
maybe another thing you can go on. I think that's what you're about to say.
Yeah. And then saying we're cleaning up and we're not going to publish these bizarre things was taking them out of the equation, because people love those bizarre things, and that's what people circulate on WhatsApp and everything. So they were killing the thing that made their product, removing, taking away revenue from themselves, all in a bid to try to fight this thing. Because what they didn't realize was that people were no longer buying the H Metro, because by the time it's in the H Metro, they've already seen it on Facebook. They've already seen it in WhatsApp groups with images and everything. And in fact, a lot of the stories that they were actually publishing, or that they still publish, are from social media sources. To say there's these students in Chinoy, they did whatever, they fought in a lecture, they were fighting over a lecturer. Where did you get that? Via WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think the only difference would be they would follow it up a bit more, and of course they've got professional writers to make it more juicy and whatnot.
Exactly. So they were shooting themselves in the foot in several ways. And
I think fundamentally the problem with that move was they took away their niche at a time where publishing in a niche is one of the most valuable things.
Exactly. So it would have made sense if they said, you know what, H Metro is not exclusively online, because that's where everyone is at. Because what online also allows you to do is they can publish those as soon as they see it. They have the notes for this. They are in the WhatsApp groups where these things break. And then there's who's online, and
exactly.
people then attach the H Metro Online to a reputation that these guys are always in the know about these crazy things that happen.
And I think it's something we can actually say happened because of these shifts in thinking is, would it be fair if I said I Harare became that publication that is known for these kind of very similar things to H Metro, but now I think they're bigger. I think it's fair to say they're bigger.
Yeah, definitely. It's right now in terms of news publications online, as we speak, as of last month, using January numbers, iHarare is the biggest news publication online in Zim.
The H Metro shot themselves in the foot.
And they grew that number on the back of that bizarre content that H Metro was actually good at.
Exactly.
But yeah, they could not imagine that because it was still lucrative selling newspapers. So they thought if we have the price, more people will buy the newspaper, and then we go to our advertisers, they advertise. But again, one of the things that I highlighted even in that article was that advertisers also don't want to put their brand alongside weird stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it wouldn't move the needle, even if they had succeeded in building out a circulation. It wouldn't have moved the needle in terms of advertising revenue. So that revenue that they halved was actually important for them. So instead of
and I
having
think they fail to understand that the way they're perceived wouldn't necessarily change.
Yes, so that was why they had said they are taking out, and I guess it was to attract the advertisers and stuff. So you're doing something
that transition would take years, eh? Exactly.
But you attract another. So it was just, yeah, they were just caught in a catch-22. And it wasn't even a catch-22, it was just a loop.
Yeah, I think it was just a bad decision because you also think of it from the perspective of if they move away from that niche, do they not become something else that already exists within that group of publications? Where exactly do they fit now?
Yeah.
Because if you say they sanitize the news, well, you would assume that that's the role of the hero.
Exactly. Yeah.
So where
fair point. Yeah.
It's a complex thing, but
yeah.
it seemed like maybe that's also one of the disadvantages of being within a group of publications where it's not as easy to map out your own way.
So yeah, and we keep coming back to niche, and I guess we never really got to the point earlier on to say, so on the internet now, niches matter.
Yeah.
Because the best sports writers can attract sports fans who love that content. Technology writers, that's how Techzim exists. Because in the old days, putting out a technology newspaper, it wouldn't have made sense because there are not enough people that we would have reached. But right now, on the internet one, the economics are easier, so we don't need too much.
Spend as much.
Yeah. And then added to that, though technology is strictly speaking, it's a small segment. People are interested in that. They are a small category of consumers. But on the internet, we can reach all of them. So on aggregate, it's a sizable number. And of course, I mean, the same problems still exist, especially when you look at advertising as a revenue model and stuff to say. But Techzim, by virtue of being in a specific vertical, I think Farai mentioned this earlier. You did, right? By being in a specific vertical, there are certain businesses that you attract that know that people who read Techzim are this sort of person.
Yeah. Yeah,
So they
that's
are
one
early
of the
adopters.
advantages.
Yeah. So you find that uh, generally speaking, the ad unit on Techzim has been priced higher than the general ad unit anywhere else. Because it is niche, we know
Advertisers know what they're going to get.
they know what they're going to get. So it's not necessarily people who are selling tech, but maybe people who are looking for, your these people who experiment a lot and stuff who are willing to try, the early adopters. So even banks that have a unique product, it may not be a tech product, but they want early adopters. They know that's kind of the audience that Techzim attracts.
Yeah.
So it goes all the way through. So again, if you were a sports, and now it's not just sports, you find the publications which were associated with as well, Soccer 24. It's just about soccer.
Yeah, you really narrow down, and
So
that seems to be the most sustainable right now, narrowing down and finding an audience.
exactly, because you can then become above average at creating that kind of content, and you are
Exactly, yeah.
writing as a fan, so you attract other fans and you become a community, and that's what the internet then has allowed. As vast as it is, it's easy to get lost in there, so people then tend to look for communities.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic example because it scales across social media, it scales across online gaming, it scales across so many aspects of the internet. Yeah, that's a good example.
Mm. So people do look for and find communities, and that's where value is created. So but then again, it will not just be advertising, unfortunately for publishers, because as much as Techzim says we charge a premium for this ad because this is, and we do,
Yeah.
that revenue still is not enough to sustain the business, because there's a limit to how much we can charge it. Because at the end of the day, the advertiser will say, yeah, I preferred you because you guys, you definitely there are these people who are coming to you. So and maybe what I'm selling uh, already is related to the content that you do. But you know what? If you are charging so much, an eyeball is an eyeball, guys. That person, I'll find
Yeah.
him on another
and,
generic
I,
site.
and I think maybe another thing to add on that makes it so complex is there's so many variables where if I see an ad and I click on it, you make more. If I see an ad, I click on it and I then buy the product or sign up for the service, you get more at each stage. So there's so many nuances that could mean you're making the most amount or you're just making the minimal, which is someone scrolling past the ad. So it's complex. It's
It's
extremely
complex.
complex.
And even
Whereas with print, I think with print it was saying you saw it in the newspaper, and because we can't trace it back to, is it the guy who was in the news who saw it in the newspaper who came to buy, there was more value. Advertisers didn't have the greatest of negotiating points.
yeah, and it was the only way to reach that person. So
Yeah.
one of the few ways to reach them. Um, so it is, but all the same, I mean, the ad revenue itself, it just remains peanuts
Yeah.
for the actual content creator. Most of the value goes to the ad networks, of which Google has one, and there are others. Uh, and then Facebook also takes a fair share of, because what Facebook managed to do was to build a massive garden uh, that people play in, and
Yeah.
they dictate the terms. So even Google doesn't have access to that garden.
Yeah.
So Facebook then advertisers to those audiences, and they allow massive targeting because people, whereas people tell Google what they are looking for on Facebook, people tell Facebook who they are, what they are interested
Yeah.
in, and things like that.
It's kind of a more personal experience,
Yeah, so advertisers
which I
value
would
that.
argue exactly it's more telling to the advertiser.
Yeah. So essentially, most of the value when it comes to digital advertising aggregates to Google and Facebook, those two companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then yeah, you have other platforms like Twitter and stuff. They then also start growing that shit. But in essence, for it to make sense to online in terms of advertising revenue being your source of income, you need to have massive scale,
Yeah.
which is achieved by these big platforms. So yeah, so you have had publishers in Zim now trying to experiment. So we talked about what the Heralds tried to do, and then recently there was a story on Techzim that said Newsday, Daily News.
Okay. Daily
Daily
news.
News, he had gone on and introduced subscription. Say, hey,
Yeah.
fine.
So what actually happened is they actually removed subscription because they had walled their content for. So when maybe a good backstory would be when the Herald, Daily News, and Newsday decided that they wouldn't publish on the internet as we mentioned before, and they would just put headlines and a small paragraph and say get the rest of the story in the paper. When the Herald and Newsday came back to the internet and said, okay, that was a mistake. We're giving you the whole story again. Uh, Daily News took a different approach. They decided we're making the story available, but behind a paywall. And they introduced a subscription model, which, in my opinion, was a terrible idea.
Why?
Well, it goes back. I think we're going to say niche 50 times in this podcast, but it goes back to the same thing where 9 out of 10 times the content you find in the Herald and Daily News and Newsday is kind of similar. It's generic news. So why would I pay for that when I can probably get it on 3 or 4 other sites?
Yeah.
What is the incentive for me to pay a subscription?
True.
And there was no incentive, which is why last week they went on Twitter. They said we're removing the paywall, and now it's gone.
Then they said you can get the news for free.
Yeah.
So
Interestingly enough, they didn't have ads as well. So I'm not sure if they're still transitioning or if they're giving the user the best experience because we know the user doesn't really like ads. Is
so
that fair to say? I think they don't
yeah,
like ads.
yeah. So I think they'll introduce because they want readership and I think they want to monetize it. Um,
Yeah.
so subscription is not a bad idea in and of itself, but like you're saying,
Yeah.
mostly works for highly niche, and even so, it's difficult. Techzim tried to set up a subscription business and we failed. It's still something that maybe in the future we'll look at again. It's difficult because people are used to getting content for free online. So
Yeah, you really have to convince someone that this is
convince them
something.
to buy is a difficult proposition.
Yeah.
So in the developed countries, it's starting to take off, and I think that's a mistake that Daily News could have made. That you know what, there was this hype that subscription is a savior to media businesses, but not all of those stories are success stories. So the number one success story when it comes to subscription for news is the New York Times. But how the New York Times approached it is one of the things that they had was a very strong brand.
Exactly.
And so they leveraged that brand that's and said, you know what, you can trust the news that we give you. And in fact, I think they changed their motto at some point, because they used to, in the newspaper era, they used to say, all the news that's fit for the paper or something like that. But they started saying all the news you can trust. So they started talking about trust. And one of the things they benefited from was the whole issue of fake news, especially in 2016 during the United States presidential campaign and the aftermath of that election. There was just a lot of talk about fake news and stuff. So people were now looking for, how do I guard myself against fake news? So the New York Times leveraged their strong brand and the positioning that they had already started to adopt for them to be that guy. So you have them, you have even the Wall Street Journal and things. So these are strong brands that then leveraged that strength of brand. So perhaps the Daily News would have tried to do that, to say, you know what, we are a news source that you can trust. Zimbabwe has a problem of propaganda.
Yeah.
Yes, if they had positioned themselves, say, yeah, we know you get all this news for free, but there's a lot of propaganda. We are the guys who just tell you as it is.
Well, objective.
Yeah. But you realize that objectivity is a myth. There's nothing called objectivity.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say as well. That there's nothing like that. As painful as it is to audiences, because I know people comment a lot and they're like, "What's the objective view?" And I think it's a mythical thing that people chase. I think it's something that will continue being chased, but that's a whole other discussion in and of itself.
It is. It is. So sad for the Daily News. In Zimbabwe, search for a business model for news on in the digital era still goes on.
What do you think of the e-papers? I know we have, I think, Fingers and the Herald are doing e-papers, which essentially, true to the listeners, an e-paper is they don't take pictures, but they put out a print which is similar to the physical newspaper and they put it on the internet. What do you think about that? Do you think that works?
So when I first saw it, when I first saw the Herald do that, I thought it was a very bad idea.
Yeah.
Because you're just putting this, it looks like a physical paper. So want to navigate when you're reading, it's very difficult because it's like you're handling that wide Herald newspaper,
exactly.
but it's on your screen. You know, the
Yeah,
layout.
so the benefit of the internet,
Yeah,
you've kind of scrapped some of that convenience.
Yeah, and the way to win on the internet again, that's what I guess we didn't talk about, is being the best. I think we talked about that because there's just so much competition. So you just have to give the best user experience. Yeah, so it involves the quality of the content itself and then the experience of it. So I thought it was, it didn't make sense to me, but it's kind of subscription as well. You pay to get the e-paper, isn't it?
Yeah. It actually is subscription. You pay a weekly fee, I think. It should be a weekly fee.
So weekly, monthly, yearly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think it's sustainable. And then, so in the case of the Herald, so the whole Zim Papers group, their newspapers, it's being done by under it's. You go to what's the website? You go to News Hub.
News Hub, yeah, yes. News Hub.
Yeah, News Hub. That's where you go and that's where you subscribe and everything. So, and you realize that these News Hub guys are trying to sell advertising on their hub itself. So there's not advertising in this physical paper, this image of a physical paper that you're seeing, and then the ads on your sides. You're having to navigate these images of a newspaper.
Yeah.
I don't understand the rationale. I don't think.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it ignores all of the benefits of the internet
Yeah,
and tries as best. I think the approach is more of a, this is the best way we can transition the old business model which made us so many millions to the internet.
yeah. So it's like no, you okay? We will deliver the newspaper to you via
Yeah.
your device.
Exactly. I think that's the best way to put it. They're not
Yeah,
delivering the news. It's
yeah.
more about the newspaper.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so you find it perhaps they were thinking of raising the number of subscribers to that thing and then add that to their numbers for advertisers to say, yeah, so our newspaper is still going to so many because the same
Yeah.
advertise it's the same paper. So even the ads are in there.
Exactly.
So I don't see it succeeding.
And I think maybe what the biggest nail on the e-paper coffin is it's so anti-mobile. It's wow, you can't do it on mobile. Like on a desktop or on a laptop, it's bearable. It's not the most amazing experience.
It's
But on
hideous, but
mobile,
you
it's
can navigate
it's a
on mobile.
different hell, or it's a different hell altogether.
Yeah. So it's crazy, and most of the people who access the internet in Zim are doing it on mobile.
Yeah. And going forward, the expectation is that that is, especially in Africa, that
Mm,
is the computing device.
yeah,
So it doesn't seem like a forward-looking move, but I guess we learn by doing.
yeah, and I know Zim Live has started a new thing.
Oh yeah, they're doing donations, similar to the Guardian in the UK, similar to the Daily Maverick in South Africa. I think those were their two inspirations for that. I was talking to the editor last week, and you were saying Daily Maverick and the Guardian. So at the end of each story, there's a plea for a donation,
Mm,
and you donate what you, well, not what you want, but anything above, anything from $5 and above.
I see, I see. So
What, what
okay,
maybe, yeah, I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but I think maybe the good thing about that is we talked about communities on the internet.
mm,
I think what they're trying to leverage on is we've built this community, and once you have a community, they're willing to what? To spare something to
yeah,
continue getting the news they're used to, the news they like. Because I know that Zim Live does generic news in the same way maybe daily news.
mm,
They do the I don't want to call it surface level because that then sounds like I'm denigrating what they do. But they do the day-to-day stuff, the
mm.
normal news. I
Yeah,
hope that
yeah. But I
that
think
does it
I think
justice.
their communication. I mean, when I read the interview you did,
Yeah,
I think what they are selling is they're saying we're selling journalism. So remember, like even the story of the New York Times, what they started selling
yeah,
was journalism to say, hey, because of how the internet has changed things, journalism itself is under threat.
yeah,
Now you have these clickbaiting things that you were talking about. Uh,
yeah,
so ZimLive, they seem to be saying, hey, we are going to do good journalism and we are doing good journalism. And if you appreciate that, please donate so that we keep doing journalism.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
essentially that is what it
yeah,
is.
because not every news publication is practicing good journalism, you know. So I think that's their angle to say we want to be good journalists, and for us to do that, you need to feed our mouths. So please donate if this is something that is important to you. So it makes sense in that, and that's what the Guardian, that the example that you gave, that was their approach as well. That's what they were saying when they started doing the donations thing, to say, hey,
Yeah,
journalism is under threat, and so please donate. What I don't like though about
Yeah, you
oh,
can
okay,
go on.
sorry, you can go on.
Well, I was just going to ask you a question in terms of the sustainability of that model. Do you think it's more sustainable, or it's?
Yes. So like you
I
say,
feel like you're leaving a lot to fate.
yeah. So like you're saying, it's if they have a community, but I think they shouldn't take it for granted that their community that they've built
Yeah,
understands and appreciates journalism the way that they do.
yeah,
Um, so remember, there's also the issue of disposable incomes and stuff, and I think that's why even the New York Times and them, it was a bit easier for them. But also, even remember the context of what was happening in America, the war. Yeah, there's fake news. It became a really huge thing, and then people were really passionate
yes.
about this.
It became a crisis, exactly.
Yeah. So it was easier to then say, hey, here's us, we are trying to remain credible and give you news that you can trust. So the New York Times, instead of subscription, they could have done donation. But why? The other reason I don't like the donation concept is donation is, it's about feeling. How do you feel today? I feel okay, I feel generous, I'll give you this.
Yeah,
It's not about value, because I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
a business should be built on value, to say, to understand that as a business, I need to create so much value that someone is willing to pay. So it can't be about, hey, we are poor journalists, tuone you. No, 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 no. So
Yeah,
at that fundamental level, I struggle with the issue of donations. I understand the thinking. I understand why the Guardian did it. I understand why Zim Live did it. But as a business person myself, I shy away from presenting
from donations.
a case for donations. My job as an entrepreneur
I
is to say, how do I create value that someone will part with money to get the
yeah.
value that I have to give them?
Yeah, I think my concern uh, with the model is kind of similar to you, but maybe not from a business maybe not from a creation of value perspective, but from a sustainability point. Because, like you said, to an extent, it feels like you're dealing with the whims of your audience. Am I in a good mood today?
Yeah,
Are things? It's you're leaving a lot to fate. Like
yeah,
it doesn't seem like you're entirely in control. So what happens in the event that in the first year um, the feedback is so positive to the point where you can hire more journalists, get more equipment, but then in the second year,
mm,
because you don't have a certain, it's not certain that people who are donating before will donate again,
mm,
as you would expect with people who pay for a product.
mm.
What happens when you have your revenue? What does that mean for the quality of your content that people have come to expect?
Exactly.
What does it mean? It's a bit complex. I think
And
it's very complex.
how are you now then attracting people to donate? You may start, you may be tempted to start, putting out theatrics and
Yeah,
sob stories and things like that. I don't know. So that's not to take away from Zim Live.
from
And
what
like,
they're trying. Yeah,
yeah, the
I
question
think
of business
maybe
models is an answer.
yeah, that's what it speaks to the fact that media, online publications are in a difficult place right now, and everyone is trying to figure that model out as best they
Yeah,
can, and in a way that's sustainable as well.
yeah. So I think this is a good place to end it, because we've gone over an hour.
Yeah, we've gone over now.
Yeah,
Oh, you can't blame us. That's I think it's it's such a complex topic. It's hard to just like run through it. There's so much happening globally and locally as well.
Yeah. So it speaks to, I mean, I think it's all media really. So we kind of weigh heavy on print, particularly news, but it's all
Yeah.
media really. When you look at television, it's basically the same things that are happening. When you look at radio,
Podcasting, challenging radio,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
So it's just a lot that's happening in this space, and like I said at the beginning, this is happening in other industries. It's just that the challenges are in different words and in different forms, but
Yeah.
uh, the technology is appending and changing the playing field, and where value is created and who is able to capture that value. Uh, so businesses can't keep thinking the way that they've always thought. You have to keep um, uh, imagining new ways of seeing things. And all the best to publishers, the best to Zim Live as they explore a new business model. All the best to Daily News as they scrape off a business model that they had undertaken. All the best
Yeah.
to the Financial Gazette. Um, it's more than a year now that they're doing subscription
Yeah.
online. I guess we need to catch up with them just to find out how well they're doing. But I think they were also placed in that their brand was also strong, and in a niche. People always identified the Financial Gazette with in-depth finance and business news. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and
They were
people
better placed than
that
many guys.
yeah, people are interested in that can be willing to pay. So I hope, because at some point the newspaper, the physical newspaper itself, the quality of the content was deteriorating. That's the fingers.
Yeah.
So I hope they spruce up the quality of the content, so that I really think they, more than anyone else, I think they have a shot at cracking subscription on the internet in Zimbabwe, because their
Yeah.
brand positions them in a very good place.
Yep. So I think that's a good place to end it. I don't think there's anything we left out.
All right. Well, I think we left Sans out. It's a complex and long story. But yeah, talking of business models, Techzim is also experimenting and pursuing e-commerce, mixing that with our content.
Yeah.
So interesting results. So you can check out techzim.market for stuff that you can buy there, gadgets and stuff like that. You can even buy some stuff on WhatsApp. So the one that I will talk about right now is airtime. You can buy
Yeah.
airtime. What's our WhatsApp number? I always ask this. 0717
Every week. 684-274. 0717 684
274.
274.
So you just
Yeah.
send the word airtime to that number, just the word airtime on WhatsApp. And so you can buy all network airtime, your Net One, your Telecel, your Econet, using your EcoCash. And it's seamless. It's really a dope way of buying. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
those are
agree.
business models.
Diversify business models, making you sustainable. One
Making
airtime sell at a time.
exactly. So it was good chatting with you, Farai. Thanks.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, and thanks to our listeners. We went overboard with this, but hope you enjoy the conversation. Well, we were just like the way we do it. It's just an informal conversation, so it's not structured in any way. So um, feel free to criticize us and to comment and uh,
Yeah.
let us know what you think.
All right.
With that,
Peace.
goodbye.